We are back. Welcome back. It is episode 10. Today, inventory risks and costs. We'll work some problems and see if we can throw some numbers on things. Everybody likes numbers, right? I hate to tell you this, but in the real world, they got a computer to work all the numbers. And that's why I don't emphasize all the different models the way other faculty would. Other faculty, of course, being trained engineering professors, like lots of work this, derived that. Nobody's going to pay you for that, so pay you for recommendations. So it's E-Week on campus. We had a crowd of young people yesterday, another crowd tomorrow. We'll celebrate. One reason why this is important to you internet people is that Thursday and Friday I'm a little overbooked because E-Week brings the Dean's Advisory Council. And these folks like to give advice and they like people to listen. That would be partially me in part. Other people get to listen. I get to sit there and a lot of aye, sir type stuff. Yep, good idea. I should recruit more students. Yes, I hadn't thought of that one. Okay, yeah, they come in and there's some really interesting people actually, and they're a lot of fun. And on Friday, if you're around campus, Chris Long, who's a EE alum, he's COO, I think, or VP of Orbital ATK, and he's doing the Bromelo lecture. That actually would be pretty interesting. I met him a couple of times in D.C., and he's really sharp, so I'd recommend that. I'll get some information on that out to you. So, it's lots of kids roaming about tomorrow. Dr. Valles will show them the 3D prototyper, which has got to be about as exciting as watching a copier. But as I did a tour yesterday for a kid, and I said, and this is the 3D prototyper, and he said, okay. I said, this one's really an expensive one. And mostly it's just a bigger looking sort of box. So, oh well. So today, some more talk about inventory. I, right before class, released assignment 2, which is due in about a week and a half or so, 8-9 days. There are problems from chapter 4, and I posted scans of the problems. So if you don't have the latest and greatest textbook, look at the scans. And we'll get to grading assignment 1, get those back to you as soon as we plow out from under the many assignments, right? Yeah, there are a lot of people in this class, so we'll just run with that. Okay, so more inventory realities. This is real stuff. In fact, a convenient product here. This isn't mine, it just happens to be here. Imagine, if you will, you were making these for a living. Stapler, the humble stapler, right? Look how many parts are in it, right? If you can't see this when you're at home, take apart a stapler, or in your office, better yet. You look productive, right? Looks like you're unjamming it. The stapler has a lot of parts, and it's a relatively simple piece of equipment, isn't it? What are they, like $5? 10? Not a lot of money in it, right? And yet, even the color, right? This is sort of a greenish, blue-greenish. If you're making blue-green staplers and you run out of blue plastic parts, you can't use pink. Story I tell people, this is really true, it happened. I saw it and I couldn't believe it. In early days, mid-range days of my working in industry, the place I worked for controlled certain things by using pink paper. Right? Everybody with me? Pink paper. Well, by some accident of fate, they ran out of pink paper. And in modern America, you run out of pink paper, what do? Go down to Office Max and see if there's some in stock, right? Well, it turns out the pink paper, for whatever reason, was unavailable. So they actually made up a stamp that said, this blue paper is pink. Which sounds like something I invented. You know, kind of like Vias Global Industries or Sonco. But I'm afraid it really happened. So these things do happen every day. I mean, obviously today everything's barcoded, but this was in the early days of barcodes being adopted, and there wasn't a whole lot of PCs out there, and so you didn't have enough local processing power. You're dealing with a mainframe, and people would print like giant stacks of things and ran out of pink paper. This blue paper is pink. Really happened. Okay, so independent-dependent demand, really important concept, don't forget it. Independent demand, we can forecast. Dependent demand, we can calculate. We talked about the economic order quantity business, right? And I suggested if you knew your costs well, the EOQ model might produce something useful for you, right? Because you got to actually know what it costs you to place an order. And you got to actually know what it costs to hold on to the thing for the model to work. If these are just out of the swag or worse end of estimating, the results you get will be pretty minimally satisfactory, if at all. If you know your costs really well, which of course is what we recommend in IE departments, right? Go with the story here, then it should work okay. If you're making things, you can also do an EOQ where you define an H prime for the denominator. Which is, we have a rate of using things up. We produce higher than the rate at which we use things up, which sounds like one of those duh type things, right? But it doesn't have to be, does it? Think about it. Does it have to be that people produce more than they use? No. Okay, it could be anything. But this won't work, obviously, if lambda is greater than p, because then you'll have a negative number in the denominator, which begs a certain suspicion. Okay, any event, an example of that we'll trot out as a tribute to the many ME alums who are in this program is our old friend Park Equipment Leasing, named after the intrepid Dr. Park. They make spare parts for the cranes, and they have some costs. It costs them $50 to set up. Now, if I use the term setup and you have no idea what I'm talking about, let me define that so that forevermore you know what you're talking about. The setup has to do with setting the machine up or the process to do something, okay? Like adjusting the tools, the depth of cut, whatever, all right? Warming up the oven, right? Anything like that is a setup cost. Now, our friends, the authors, like to use a carrying cost of money, interest. That has to do with, guess what? You borrow money to buy parts, raw materials and parts. Okay, there's two places you can get money: from yourself or from others. Not many other choices, right? If you go into your pocket and pull out the money to make the parts, you still can't use it for something else. Now, in a less politically correct time, we use the expression of you could buy beer with the money, for example. Today we'll skip over that, but you get the idea. What would you do? What's the best use of your money, right? Costs you $5 to make the part. The demand is 25. The production rate is 50. And I call your attention to page 219 as well. We say the optimal quantity the holding cost comes from the H that generates the H prime. So, with our friends Park Equipment, we discover the following. H prime of 5 times 0.1. Okay, so we know H is 50 cents. H prime equals 1 minus lambda over P. So our H prime results in a quarter. So Q star if I did my math right, make 100 at a time. And again, this works just like example 4.3. Take a look at that. What are you going to do in real life? Might be an interesting question, right? You don't picture anyone going out and doing this, do you? No. Actually, what happens is when you do this, each part that you make has its own part master record in a computer system. All right, and it's kind of like the life of that part. And for each part in your product, you specify order method, any costs associated with it, like setup, run times, etc. So if you want to visualize what's going on at the large corporate and small corporate entities of the world, what they do is every part in their system has a part number, right? It has configuration management, which we don't teach a lot of in college, to the great dismay of all our industrial partners. The thing I tell people is when I got out into industry, I was utterly astonished to discover the concept of the engineering change notice, or engineering change order, which is how a lot of people make money, but that's a story for a different day. We'll stay out of that. But essentially, products have what's called configuration management control. So, in other words, if you make, for example, staplers, right, you gotta do what? Say what goes into the stapler. Then each part has a record in the system. So, for example, whatever they call this top piece, right, has its own part number that links to a part record. Okay, if you've never seen this, then take a look at the assembly instructions for any random thing you bought recently. For example, a couple of weeks ago, I got to assemble a tabletop gas grill, and all of the screws had part numbers. Okay, the instructions were, to say the least, minimal, but the thing's working, it's together, it didn't blow up. I didn't burn my house down yet, right? No accidents with propane. But nonetheless, every part on that thing has a specific order method, how it's ordered. It has revision control, and all of this is linked in a computer system with what's called a part master record. Okay, so these calculations get done what? Automatically, right? You don't think anybody's going to pay someone the kind of money you guys make to do this problem, right? Not if they could get a computer to do it quite a bit faster and more likely correct, right? But joking aside, realistically, the part would have a part number. The part number creates a part master record. And as we'll see, it has a unit of measure and various other things about it, including the costs. Now, ideally, you know what it costs to set something up. Or, alternatively, you know how long it takes, and you let the system apply at whatever cost somebody thinks is the latest cost. And that could vary by particular facility as well. For example, our friends at Los Alamos National Lab, some facilities have much more significant setup costs, because in order to set up the thing, you got to put on all your rad worker garments and work in the glove box, right? Whereas if, say, like you looked at, say, an option like pumping gas at the gas station, the setup costs are what? Relatively minimal, right? Stick your card in the thing, or walk in, hand the person some money, go out. You got to open the door, right? Unscrew the cap, stick the hose in. Once you click the nozzle, now you're in production, so to speak. Okay, so you can't graduate from IE program without knowing what setup costs are. So we now have told everyone. So if I ever hear from any recruiter you didn't know what setup costs were, bad. So some more examples. Thought we'd look at a couple of problems from the book, and I call your attention to number 31 on page 242. '31 and 36. Menlo Park, California, I believe, is right near Stanford University in Palo Alto. Confirmation from the audience, good. They sell Melita coffee filters. You've probably seen them yourself. They sell them at a rate of 60 boxes a month, $2.80 a box, $20 to order, and 22% ideally, what would I do? I could look at an economic order quantity, right? Sounds like it's that time of the semester, since we're talking about that. I could calculate an EOQ, thereby annoying, no doubt, everyone in the store, who would probably say, why don't we get the filters from someone nearby? Now, not long ago, I happened to order something from a company in Wisconsin, and I saw, I'll see that in about a week, and it turned out I saw it in 2 days because they have a Salt Lake City distribution center. And so it takes a day to get to Albuquerque and another day to get from Albuquerque here. Fantastic, right? That's planning. Okay, so how would I attack this? Well, obviously, much to your surprise, this is an EOQ problem, right? So 60 a month leads to 720 a year. Would be nice if I didn't invent my own equation as I was writing. So guys, someone will just ask, why is the 2 outside the radical sign? Did you do something different? Okay, so 2 times 20 times 720. The H is 0.22 times 280 a box. That equals 216. Which is going to make you real popular with the vendor, isn't it? More likely, what would you do? You could say time to order, Q over lambda. It's 0.3 year. This likely is not something you can do. What you might have to research is what's the average size the vendor can sell you that is close to 216. So for example, if there's say 40 things of filters in a box, you could order 200 or 240. The idea that you can order exactly the EOQ is a little rough on people because they might not sell it that way, right? And it costs them money to break up a carton. They might not want to do that. They'll sell you 200 or 240, and then you deal with that. Okay, any event, that's that. Suppose it takes 3 weeks to place an order and get it in. What inventory of filters should be on hand when the order's placed? From our textbook, we know the rate of use is lambda times time. And what we're likely to do is place an order in such a way that we had 60 a month. It takes 3 weeks, so roughly 3/4 of a month. So what do you do? Well, if these guys were on a computer for inventory at 0.45, as soon as you sell number 44, the computer will say, hey, bam, order more filters. Then it asks the average holding and fixed costs if they go with this optimal policy. Everyone follow this? Yes? No? Maybe? Yeah. Positive feedback. It always works. Okay. This seems mind-numbingly mundane, right? On the other hand, the last time you went to the store and the shelf was empty, somebody did what? They either predicted demand wrong or they didn't order in time, right? In the chapter, there is a cost equation, G of Q star, So if you can actually do this model, in theory it will cost you $133.19 per year, which to all you many big spenders out there sounds not very impressive. And I say, yes, I agree. But even if you've been in a Starbucks or a Pete's, there's how many inventory items in there? There's a lot of stuff they sell, right? And they've got one of these for everything they sell. And of course, these numbers are for a relatively low-priced consumer item, right? What if you were carrying expensive parts? And so forth. Okay. So this is just an example of how someone would calculate that. The fact that it's only $133, just keep in mind how many cups of coffee do they have to sell? Or if they sell these filters, right, even if they sell them for $4 a box, right, it's a long time to make up $133.19 because it costs them $280 for the box plus the inventory costs, right? So they're making what, a quarter a box, 50 cents? They got to sell 200 boxes of filters, 300 boxes of filters just to cover this. Now, again, I agree, $133 is not a lot of money necessarily to people taking this class, depending on where you are in life. But you can agree that that's $133 you might not have to spend. All right, they ask that they say it's a small store. In what way might this affect the solution? Well, probably what's going to happen is what? They'll either order less, or the store manager will do what with the extra filters if they order the EOQ? Bring the box home and bring them in as inventory goes down? It's entirely possible, right? Now, the more enterprising out there would say, hey, why don't they rent a storage facility? Another good idea, right? But now you have the cost of storage facility added to this, right? And so forth. Now, realistically, I suspect the peach stores probably order their stuff from a central distributor. They probably don't order filters from New Jersey, and they don't take 3 weeks to get there. Not in these quantities. But, you know, if you go with the structure of the problem, this makes a lot of sense. Okay, so that's 31. The new assignment has problems that are a lot like this in some form. And I mentioned 36, which I happen to like because it's got an annoying CEO. So I always like those when the CEO is wrong. Okay, 36 is value filters. Okay, they have a demand of $1,800 a year, $2.40 a unit. Interest is 30%. Setup is $100. Everyone got the picture? It's a manufacturing EOQ problem, right? Sometime after this master plan was implemented, the cost accounting department had time to perform an analysis and identified several oopses in the form of setup equals $40, not $100, and I equals 20%. So, do we fire the president? Answer, Not worth it. Essentially, it asks what are the extra costs resulting from this observation. Because what will this do? This will generate, when I is larger, it'll generate a higher EOQ, right? Seems like it shouldn't, but so we'll call this Q star of the pres. It's fashionable to blame somebody, so let's find out. 2 times 100 times 1800 over the combination of the change in the numerator and change in the denominator will generate something different. In your textbook, there's a cost error. Calculate an error. This is equal to 1.033. This is 707 over 548. %. So the next question is, should we get excited about this? And the answer is going to be, nah, not worth it. The optimal cost at the cost accountant's level of expenditure two times setup cost, quantity demanded, interest cost, holding cost. $8.68 a year. You're saying, ooh, wow. Actually, what is the key problem with this thing is these numbers result in relatively meaningless result, right? 868 isn't even going to buy you lunch some places, right? Not worth getting excited about. What would be more interesting in a real company is how the president got this number and this number, and the cost accountant got these numbers. Because what that's suggesting is the president either A, was misinformed, or B, was not listening. Because alternative C would be, historically, we discovered we gave you the wrong numbers, right? Any of those are possible. Now, this is a problem. I mean, would you really get excited about this? No. I mean, obviously, $8.68 a year would not be a lot of money to a Girl Scout troop selling cookies, right? Some dad would hand a 10 to the leader and say, enough already, right? Get over it. Is that important, though? Answer is, it's probably more important if the president discovered what? That this setup cost was $1,000. That would be a problem, right? If you went in with an estimate of 100 and it turned out to be an order of 10 off, that'd be pretty serious now. I mean, with these numbers, who's going to get excited? It's mostly, here's how the calculation's done. But EOQs are funny things, and you can generate an EOQ that's very wrong. I mean, I agree the difference between ordering 707 and 548 might not be that much, right? On the other hand, imagine these are trailer loads of things, not just individual parts. Now you've got a significant commitment, right? If you're dealing with materials by the trailer load, you're talking about a lot of stuff, right? So while in the context of the problem, coming up with $8.68 a year isn't likely to impress anyone, right? But outside that context, there could be some significant changes. So as we move on, I wanted to add a bit of realism to our discussion, which is in most cases, these things are stochastic. We don't really know what they are. Lead times change, demand changes, that kind of thing. If you want an excellent experience of lead time, consider this problem. You call up the local car place, bring in your car to have them look at something. They say drop it off tomorrow morning at 8. We'll have it back to you that day. 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you discover your car is not ready. Now you have a lead time problem, don't you? Or alternatively, how long will it take for certain things to happen? you can create what's called a stockout problem. You can observe stockout at the local Walmart, Albertsons, Safeway, what have you. Just go take a look on the shelf for your favorite frozen item and see if it's there. If it's not there, do you want to come back tomorrow when the truck comes, or Thursday when the truck comes? So generally what people have evolved over time is the idea of a safety stock. It reduces the risk of a stockout. Now, safety stock makes sense when? When the cost of a stockout is higher than the cost to keep the stuff around. What that looks like graphically is, say, this was our demand use over time, and we reordered, and then we hit bottom before we could reorder. That's a stockout. So if you wander down to the local frozen foods looking for example, a certain type of ice cream, the shelf is empty, they have a stockout, correct? What decision do you have now? Do I only want that flavor from that vendor, or will I eat anything they'll sell me? Up to you, right? But you've experienced a stockout. Okay, fundamentally what someone will do will take so if we have an instant reorder, which of course makes no sense conceptually with a stockout, but say it exists, and our lead time for placing an order is this number of periods, what's a reasonable person to do? You might take a look at demand and say, what is the worst situation I've ever had, and order some extra. Let's say we use 50 a month, and it takes 2 weeks. So we're using 12 or 13 a week, right? So what you could do is say, if I use 50 a month, I'll plan to have, and it takes 2 weeks to reorder, you could say I'll have 12 in inventory. It's an idea, 10, 12, 15. Remember, those 12 are doing what? Generating holding costs, right? But they're there against the probability of a stockout. Now, if I can refill my inventory within a day. I don't need to plan for safety stock, do I? And I don't incur holding costs, which would be the eventual argument for just-in-time production and purchasing. Right? So when I think about inventory, what I'm thinking about is what are the things that are likely to do what? Annoy the system more than other things. In other words, what sorts of products would I want to have safety stock of? The components that it would be inconvenient to be out of stock of, right? There are any number of examples of safety stock. What you're thinking about here is not hoarding or maintaining some number of months of supply just to have it against natural disaster or something. This is the idea that changes in demand may lead to a sudden overuse, thereby using up things faster than normal. Suppose you sold sports apparel. Example, like the one example I use is that fanatics.com. Year-round, they're probably selling Major League Baseball items, correct? In the summer, safety stock would be more important, and around World Series time and such things, planning accordingly would be more important. Would make sense, right? In January, is anybody restocking their supply of baseball hats? Not really. February they start, right? Spring training gets going mid-February. People start posting on Facebook, buying apparel. Demand goes up. The season hits, demand increases. Your team is out of the race in August, demand goes, boom, down, right? Okay, so a good way to think about it. But one way we think about parts is what's called an ABC analysis. Because you can imagine the amount of attention required on a part varies quite a bit with their significance. So, for example, if your inventory happened to be aircraft, then engines might be in Class A, right? Whereas seat cushions might be in Class C. Make sense? So typically when people think about this, what they're trying to do is what are the things we actually pay attention to and what are the things that are relatively automatic and require less intervention. And that's based on the famous alleged Pareto principle. There's various people that say he never said this and other such things, but the important few, the trivial many. You want to put most of your effort on the 20% of the items that will get you into grief. So if you imagine you ran a spares depot, you might really be interested in how many engines are out there all the time, whereas seat cushions might be relatively unimportant parts, parts easily purchased. They're down here. Expensive parts. And graphically, that would look like this. But you can't go into a lot of excitement about every part in your inventory, right? Drive everyone into quitting if you do that. That's not good. So fundamentally, most of the items you have, say for example we pick like our friends in the Aggie innovation space, the C items are things like cardboard that they use for doing low resolution prototyping. Cardboard's cheap, easily obtainable, right? If you're really out of cardboard, you can just go down a recycle pile under the stairs, cut up a few boxes, right? On the other hand, 3D prototyper, expensive, not easily replaced, and a lot of accountability for one disappearing, right? Laser cutter, they're up here. Number 6 machine screws, 1 inch long, down here, and so forth. So wherever you go, you can identify the important things and mostly things that are just there. Because most inventory ordering is actually fairly automatic. It's figuring out what to pay attention to that becomes an issue for people in the real world. Interestingly enough, NMSU gets overexcited about a fair number of A items. But like any large organization, it has its idiosyncrasies. I was hounded on inventory for a property inventory a few years ago for some piece of hardware that had been destroyed in a Jet Hall fire. And for whatever reason, it didn't get written off, and it was some computer from 1990. It was worth $24,000 then. So you can imagine the excitement. It was quite entertaining. I pointed out that at the time I was teaching this class, I pointed that out, and they said, "We don't care what you teach. You are threatening me with some vice president. He can come help me look." Okay, more seriously, knowing what's important to pay attention to is very important. And one way to think about it is the cost of safety stock versus the cost of the expected number of stockouts. The cost of the safety stock goes up with the A items, down with the C items. To do all this, you got to have a lot of data, and it's got to be good. So I do point out open stock rooms tend to have things disappear. I'm not even suggesting people are pilfering them. They just disappear. You lose track of them. We have 3 cartons of copy paper sitting in the back of the IE office. Once in a while, someone will need paper for the printer. For them, it's really important, right? They need to print something. For me, it's like, hey, you know where it is. Go get it. Could someone actually walk out with a carton? Yeah, I suppose so. Is anyone going to? Probably not. But if I needed to maintain that accurately, that would be a problem. You don't receive things right. You don't order the right things. You don't record what comes back. Things are put in the wrong location. Generally, to do this well, you have to have really accurate inventory records, and that's important. You've got to have controlled access. Using barcodes is very helpful. Often you have to do a physical count. And generally, in the midst of using an ERP or Enterprise Resource Planning System to do inventory and ordering, you'll find yourself doing cycle counting, which is statistically generated counting based on probability of loss and things like that. Go out and count things. Are they really there? Because guess what? If they're not there and you think they're there, that's a problem. Now, if we're worried about coffee filters, what's the guy at Pete's going to do? Probably go down a local Costco and buy some, right? Walmart, wherever they're cheap. But realistically, this can become an issue in the actual world. And we'll talk more about it as we go. You need to know these data, which not everybody knows. Variations. How long does it take to actually place an order and get it in? If you've ever ordered anything for your employer, be it NMSU, the Army, whomever, getting it officially ordered and then getting it in to stock is a production. And you've got to be able to tell what your costs are. And a lot of people don't know what their costs are. Hey, I teach the class, and somebody asked me, what does it cost to get a degree? Or what does it cost to run the IE department? I know what I'm spending. But what the real costs are less obvious. I can tell you what's going out of pocket. I know what the salary budgets are, the operating budget, that kind of thing. But if someone were to say, what does it cost to give a kid a bachelor's degree, you know, there's no way I could tell you. I could tell you out of pocket roughly what somebody's paying. But what are the costs of making these things? And just remember, if it really was as easy as problem 36, we wouldn't need to hire IEs, would we? When we think about buying stuff, which we're going to think about, is essentially, this is important, who supplies the product. That's why the thing with Menlo Park in New Jersey, well, there's a Menlo Park, New Jersey also, but the one in California and the filters come from New Jersey. They're the only people who sell filters. Could we get someone else? Are they the cheapest ones, or are they the best ones? Quality is important in these things. A lot of people have gone to sole source type things. for inventory. The problem with sole source is you're actually counting on those people. And if for some reason they don't deliver, that can be an issue. The other thing that we'll talk about, and this is all just a lead-in to our next discussion, is it might be useful to work with the supplier. Now, when I started in industry, the idea of working with a supplier was quite bizarre. What you usually heard was, who can give me the cheapest price? Not who can give me the best product and so forth, which led to many jokes about aircraft being built on the lowest bidder and that kind of thing. And then subsequently, as I've gone through my career, people have recognized the value of working with the supplier. So if you think about it, if, say, you're buying microprocessors from, I don't know, Intel or AMD, the chances are they actually know more about it than your staff, right? And so if you help them become part of solving your customer's problem, that can be quite important. So as you start to think about this as a real-world thing, if we take our friend this stapler, which was conveniently left behind by someone, you might want to look at, say, these injection molded parts here. Maybe we could buy a whole bunch of them from the same injection molder, right? Instead of just buying the blue ones, or blue-green, turquoise, whatever that color is, teal. It's hard to tell on camera, right? So these are all things that we're going to talk about as we start to think about inventory. Because, I mean, it's one thing to do the calculations, right? You do it, you see, buy 57 a month or whatever. But like I joked, I mean, the people might not want to sell you 216 a month. But if you went to a vendor and said, I'm going to buy 720 a year, and let's make an arrangement that you'll have them available to me differently than 3 weeks from when I place an order, they might be willing to do that, right? Because that would give them, they have a guaranteed production schedule for you. You have a more or less lock on a price. That would be a way cool way to do business instead of restarting every time you needed to place an order. And that is something we'll continue to think about as we go. Philosophically, how do we get the best thing for the customer is the question. Okay, we are out of time one more time. I will see you all next time, and we'll continue forward.